Hello, I'm Lee Morrison and welcome back to Bespoke Addict YouTube channel. In the previous video, this particular shoe was stripped of all of the clear polish. It's clear polish that was used, not a coloured polish. This shoe is still in its original state. It's quite a difference. It's a little bit wrinkled. I'll get this one out of the way. We don't need to be using that just now. So the shoe's totally dry at this stage. In the last video, it was completely wet and looked a lot darker. Now all the polish is removed. The skin's actually in better condition than I thought. A lot of what appeared to be surface cracking was the polish itself cracking. There's some very minute cracking to the skin. It's extremely minute, nothing to worry about. They will easily be smoothed out. Now, the main reason for this video today is, as discussed in the previous video, we're going to be shrinking this shoe. This shoe is stretched through use, and particularly across the vamp area, I can squeeze quite a lot of leather there. It's at least 10 millimeters, and it flops about and it appears baggy and wrinkly. And the same in this area, under the ball of the foot into the welt, and equally around here. I've stripped this shoe back many times. It's about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old. They were brand new. They were a Northampton Benchmade shoe. They're not a bespoke shoe, and I always strip off all old polish, any surface residue, to get to the skin, to be able to treat the skin. It's not an easy job to try and moisturise and treat through an existing surface of polish. So that's where we are now, completely back at the bare skin. And what this is going to allow us to do is to steam through the open skin and shrink onto what is in fact a bespoke Foster and Son tree. This is not a last, it's a tree. And this is a bespoke tree which was made for another pair of bespoke Foster and Son shoes I own. They probably fit me better than any other shoe in my collection. Now this is a bespoke tree made to fit that bespoke shoe. It's the perfect shape. This shoe's previously been shrunken onto this tree. I've done it. I've definitely done it once before, it's possibly even twice. So this is either the second or the third time I've gone through this process. With time, the skin stretch again. It's just inevitable. It will stretch. Any shoe of any quality, if worn enough, will stretch. But I've discovered by trial and error ways of shrinking the skins back. And this tree is a beautiful shape to me, so we'll lose a good few millimeters across the vamp and into there. It's absolutely critical that the trees are used, and they need to be ideally a fixed tree. The skin will shrink, but it can only shrink as far as the item that's inside it, which is the shape I'm after. Now, I've got a series of trees here to show you that could be considered. These are the most common types of tree. They're a universal, but they're spring loaded. They're designed, they spring sideways, and they also spring back and forth. Truthfully, not ideal for our purposes, but they are the most common trees out there. A bespoke tree like this is very difficult to come by, can be very costly, and also there's nothing you can do really to sort of modify the shape. The only thing you can do is remove the hinge and maybe file or sand a little bit off to reduce a little bit of length. It's very difficult to add length. If you were to use a springy one, it would have to be locked in place somehow, because it can spring both sideways and lengthwise. With the steaming process, this is going to shrink, and if that tree is not locked, it will simply shrink too much. So I don't know. We'd have to shove maybe pieces of cardboard or a pencil into the maybe shove a pencil into here to stop it, shrinking too much. Equally, the length could be lost. So I don't know, a pack of coins, I don't know, some coins or pieces of plastic, something would have to be used to create a barrier to prevent the flexing. I never use one of those. I've got a lot of trees, and that's not one I would consider. So if you do decide to do this process, be very, very cautious if you use a spring-loaded tree. It's just, I can't stress enough, it's got to be locked with whatever comes to hand, cardboard, bits of wood, bits of plastic. This one's much more flexible. This one is not a bespoke tree, but it's a universal tree, and it's on a thread. this thread can be turned. If I can get my hands out of the way, there we go. Yeah, there's a thread here, so you can extend the length, turn the thread the other way. It shortens the tree. It doesn't extend the width at all. So when that one's in, that's a really tight fit. In fact, that'd have to be shortened slightly. Which way is it? No, that's it. Turn it back in. So yeah, it'd take a lot of fiddling to get the shape you're after. But yeah, we've still got the bagginess here. We've still got the bagginess on the vamp. But because this is locked in place, we know we're not going to lose any of the length. So that one will be fine. This one's definitely fine. I've also got another one here which is less complicated. It's just got a key, and it slides in and out, so it can be locked into position. There's no way of, if these are tightly locked, as I say, with a universal spring loaded type, that would be rather difficult to use. Personally, I wouldn't risk it, but if you want to take the risk, do be careful and make sure you sort of chock very, very strongly the movable area. So once you've found roughly the size you want, you chock it. Okay, so I'm going to use this tree, get these two out of the way. I'm also going to use a towel to protect my surface. What I'm going to be doing is using a wet towel, which is in this pot here, and I've got a cheap domestic steam iron, and they're my tools. Water, towels, and a domestic steam iron. Let me just pick this up off the floor, it's hot. Ah. Okay. Yeah, it's very, very hot. Okay. Now, I must stress there's a lot that can go wrong with this method. I'm going to be avoiding the toe caps. Toe caps always have a strengthener behind them. It's some kind of a stiffening material to strengthen. Now that generally doesn't shrink. The skin on the outside will shrink, but the stiffener inside won't shrink. It will fold and buckle. You can get away with, if the toe cap's too big, you can get away with shrinking the edges down into the welts and sort of pull the skin to the side. You know, you can lose a few millimeters around here. You can very, very carefully, just a very quick steam. If you stick the iron on and leave it sizzling away, you'll see what I mean when I say sizzling in a few minutes when I start doing this. It will simply shrink the cap too much, and you'll end up with wrinkles in the cap because the backing won't shrink. But it's not such a problem on these areas, and it's definitely not usually a problem down here. This is where I'm focusing on today. So I must stress, toe caps shrink with extreme care. So I'm just going to pop on these pair of gloves, just more to protect my skin from the steam and the extreme heat of this process. Where are we? Okay. Actually, I could do with a little bit of water inside the shoe as well. Let's just put some inside the shoe. Give it a shake about. I just want to dampen the inside of the shoe so the steam will come through. Really slush the. There's about probably, I don't know, 25-30 millilitres. You might be able to hear it slopping about. Okay. Now I'm just going to simply pour that back into the container. So the shoe's quite wet inside now. Pop the dry tree back inside, and I'll take my towel, which needs to be need to wring it out of excess, but it does need to be very, very wet. So it's going to really hiss and steam, and actually it's too dry. Try again. It's very important to keep this towel really wet at all times because of the extreme heat. It dries out quickly. So here we go. Just going to pop the wet towel. Where shall I start? I'm going to start around the edges. So let's do this edge first because this one needs less work. I'm going to work the hot edge of the iron into that channel there, into the stitching channel. So we'll be pulling skin down really tightly into that channel. But of course, we pop the towel on first, so you are working rather blind. I'll bring this hot iron round. Where's the channel? There it is. There we go, hiss, sizzle. You can probably see the steam starting to rise. I've got the iron on a bit of an angle, so the edge of the iron's going into that groove. There we go. Just so move it quite quickly, and now I go back into the groove, right into the stitching channel, into the welt, and then move up onto the skin on the edging. I'm now not touching the welt, but move around quite a lot. I need less work down here. It doesn't need so much shrinking now. Just skim over it, but it does need a lot on this vamp area. Okay, put that down. The towel's got a bit dry, so turn it over, wet the towel again. Yeah, it's quite a process. Bit of a shock to see this being done, but I've done it many times. There is a lot that can go wrong, and it doesn't work on shoes that have synthetic coatings. Many modern shoes do. So let's just pop this deep into the welt again. Just working the edge of the iron into the edging of the shoe, by where the sole joins the shoe in the welt, where in the stitching area. Now this area around here, I do want a lot of shrink, so I'll give that quite a lot of attention. Okay, just quickly skim over the toes, very quickly. It's as I said before, the toes can go very wrong. That's okay. Move quickly, very quickly. Let's have a look. It's done a little bit, probably 10% of what we need. And now it's starting to really bulge there, because these areas here are now very tight. That's tight, that's tight. This area is really loose now. So let's get a very wet part of the towel. We'll pop that directly onto the welt. No, it's not the welt, it's the vamp. And go in with the, trying to avoid the toe cap. I'm using the point of the iron, working up a little bit, working up a little bit where the laces are. Laces are tied very tightly. If you don't tie the laces, it shrinks so much and you get like a V shape. These skins get pulled quite far down here, and it will open up. You get like a V shape where the laces will no longer come together. So let's use another bit of the towel. That's too dry, nice and wet. Yeah, very wet actually, the wetter the better. There we go. So I'm trying to use largely the point of the iron. If I use the flat of the iron, it's too clumsy, it goes down to the toe. So using the point of the iron. There we go. Moving quite quickly. You don't want to focus too much on any one area, because that one area will shrink rapidly. Then you've got a small spot where you don't want it. So trick is to try and pull all the skin at the same time, which is, you need a lot of heat spread really very quickly over a large area. Okay, let's have a look. It's getting there. Lost maybe 20-25%. So I'm going to wet the towel again. Oh, it's hot work. So I'm going to start again. I'll work a little bit more around the heel. I didn't do that very much last time. It doesn't need a great deal of stretch, but what you find, you can, an area that doesn't necessarily need any more shrinking, you can drag skin from areas where it does need it. It will, if you do too much here, you might get wrinkles, but over a long period, what we got there, 150 millimeters, but there's only probably 50 mil that actually needs shrinking. But out of that 50 mil, we need to lose, let's say, 5 or 10 millimeters. But we can sort of spread that over the whole 150 millimeters by sort of, if you shrink here, it will drag excess from there, if you like it. But if you try and concentrate too much in one area, you can cause a lot of unsettling in the shoe, hard bits, lumpy bits, wrinkles, etc. So yeah, spread it over the whole thing. I'm now going to shrink an area that doesn't actually need shrinking, purely trying to draw skin from another area. So wrap the soaking wet towel back again. And like I say, it doesn't really need it around here, but I'm going to do it anyway. As I say, drawing skin from over further down the shoe. Wrap it round, right around the heel. Keep it nice and tight into the welted stitching area. Now we're working back towards where we do want shrink, but it would have already lost some skin over there. It does sort of, it's only a millimetre or so, and you don't notice a millimetre or so over a long distance. It doesn't distort the stitching. And then right up into the toe area, be careful of the toes. Try to avoid the flat area of the toe as much as possible. You're okay down in the stitching area around here. And once again, this heat will be drawing the skin along from the area where we want to lose it. There's nothing really to lose there, so it's got to go somewhere. So it will drag something that's loose from another area of the shoe. It can't go anywhere because of the wooden tree inside. Now we are back on the area where I wanted to lose it. Press on a bit harder, be a bit more vigorous. Back round where we don't want to be losing it again, but it won't go any further. It's got the tree inside. It just can't go any further. All it can do is sort of somehow it drags the skin from the loose areas. So you're then not committed to losing all of it within a tiny area. You lose a smaller bit over a very large surface area. That's the key. That's better. Pop the cloth back in for another soaking. Wring it out. Okay. Right. So once again, I'm going to work on the areas that need less shrink, trying to drag it from areas that do need shrink. I'm working on the toe cap that definitely doesn't need it. But even if we only drag 1.5 millimeters this way, it'll be a big help. And the same here, around about the heel. Definitely doesn't need any more shrink. It isn't going to shrink because of the wooden block inside, but it's very likely to drag at least 1 millimeter or 2. So we've dragged 1 millimeter or 2 that way and 1 millimeter or 2 that way. That's quite a lot of drag. So it just reduces the concentration in one area, which I'm now working on, pushing really hard. Push very hard. And move reasonably quickly on the areas that I don't particularly want to shrink. So the same again, it doesn't really need any, flip this out of the way, it doesn't really need any shrink around there. But if I shrink that, it will drag some of the skin, some of this loose floppy skin, it will sort of drag it upwards. And bizarrely, it doesn't seem to upset the stitching. You would, in theory, if you told some of this story without showing them, you know, their first thing would be, their thought would say, well, it must be distorting the stitching lines will be all over the place. But you'll see when we come to the end of this film, the stitching will be just fine. Okay, it takes quite a bit of time. You have to go over it and over it. I'm now back on the areas where we don't want shrink, trying to drag the skin from the baggy areas. Okay, it's getting dry. There's not enough steam or hiss. Wet that again. But I learned to shrink leather many years ago. Amongst shoes, I'm very, very fond of old Jaguar cars, particularly from the 60s and early 70s, and they have leather interiors that stretch. There's a lot of leather. It's a huge surface area, and it's quite soft leather, and with people sitting on it constantly and springing around for hours on end, the leather stretches and they become very floppy. So I did this years ago for the first time on a very old Jaguar, and I was quite pleased with the result. I just literally lay a wet towel on my car seat and went over it with the iron, and I lost the bagginess that it appeared. It did take some moisturising afterwards, but yeah, a lot of the leather techniques I use on my shoes I've learnt on my old cars, repairing neglected seats. The problem is with car interiors, they get baked from the sunshine. You know, it's like a greenhouse in the winter. You've got all the glass and the doors are closed. It's incredibly hot, and they're rather exposed to light. So yeah, they suffer. Car seats suffer far more than shoes. Shoes don't generally get exposed to that amount of light, just sitting for hours on end in light, with the heat coming through the glass like a greenhouse. So they're actually easier to repair, shoes. Okay, let's have another look. Here we go. Oh, that's hot. It's very stiff. Very stiff there. No, it's all floppy here, because that's really tight and that's really tight. And in contrast, this bit is baggy. We'll come back to that. Actually, let's just do a bit more under here. That one's, it's lovely and tight here. Just still a bit springy there. Just get a very wet bit of the towel. Pop it in there. Push quite hard. I do not recommend that you try this on your favourite pair of shoes. Try it on a really old, neglected pair that you're not bothered about. Maybe even acquire something dreadful second-hand from a junk shop or so on, just to practice on. Do not pick out your favourite pair of shoes, and it's just simply too much risk. It does take a bit of practice, and like I say, done carefully, you can get away with it. And this looks mad. It looks insane. Steam rising, hissing, spitting. The skin looks all bumpy. But I promise you, when this is completely finished, there'll be no evidence that this has been done, apart from the shoe will be very, very tight. Lovely crisp outline, lovely crisp shape, a fantastic fit on the foot, because that tree that's inside is almost a perfect bespoke shape on me, and we can't go any tighter than that. It's in there. The skin cannot go any tighter than that tree. It just won't allow it. Remove the tree and it could, you know, it would end up like a walnut. It just shrivel up. Here we go. We're getting there now. When they're hot, they tend to still be a bit springy. When it dries and cools, it shrinks. So I'm going to do another bit here, quite a bit there. And I think, let's have a look. I think I'm going to call it a day. Is that? No, I'm not. I'm just going to do, I want that to be just a bit tighter. It pops out too easy. So I'm just going to, I'll do this. Let me do that area again. I'll do all the way around here and really deep. And then I think that will be a bit tighter. And when it's tight, I'll allow it to dry. It could, in all probability, will take overnight, so we won't be finishing this today. I'll be doing other, if I've got the other shoe to do as well, but I will be doing other shrinkings and stretchings on various shoes. So this will appear time and time again in my channel of shrinking, stretching, different. There are slightly different techniques for different skins, so I'll try and do them all, and just keep it coming for you. And here we go. Oh gosh, that's hot. Yeah, this is a ready-to-wear, factory-made pair of shoes. These are not bespoke, so you wouldn't expect the fit that I'm trying to achieve. I'm trying to achieve a bespoke type of fit. And there's no way that you would expect that on a pair of Northampton factory bench-made shoes. They're very finely made, very nice, extremely good quality, but they are made to fit most people. They're not a bespoke shoe. So there we go. Oh, that's better. Now then, let's just go around this area one more time. So once these are finished, this pair of bench-made, ready-to-wear shoes will have quite a bespoke appearance. They'll be very, very different to a standard pair. I do this to most of my ready-to-wear shoes in my collection of whatever skin. I just love the perfect fit of a bespoke shoe, but it's not who can have that many pairs of bespoke shoes? They are jolly pricey. But, modifying very discreetly and carefully a ready-to-wear shoe. Here we go. It just gives it such a much finer appearance. Oh, that's hot. More water. The heat. I'm not wearing the best jacket for such heat. I'm wearing an old smoking jacket, an old velvet smoking jacket. It looks rather nice, and I don't mind too much if I get a bit of muck on it, but wow, is it hot for doing this. Okay, just going all the way around the edges again, just tighten them up as much as I possibly can. Ooh. But the towel has to remain very, very, very wet. There we go, let's go right around that heel, try and tighten that tree up inside. Let's see if we can tighten it so that it doesn't just pop out. I need to be able to force it out, ideally. Okay. Flip the towel over, we need the wet bit. Oh, that's hot. Now, these vinyl gloves protect me to a certain degree. You know, you touch the steaming hot towel with the bare skin, it can blister you. You do get a little bit of protection from the vinyl gloves. Moving quite quickly now. Okay. As I say to you, I'll be doing this many times over the coming months on differing shoes, different styles, different reasons for being shrunken. Maybe they're brand new and they're simply too big, but the styling was so lovely and the price was so right, I couldn't resist buying them. So I do that. I buy them and I reshape a brand new shoe. This pair were slightly baggy on the vamps. The length was perfect when I got them brand new, but they were slightly baggy on the vamp. This is the area I'm doing right now, and they were certainly baggy down into the welts. So yeah, that's the reason I shrunken these. But over time, with lots and lots and lots of wear, running about on the beach, getting them wet in the rain, they've stretched quite a lot. You know, they're almost back to the size they originally were when I bought them. That's better. It's a bit tighter now, and yeah, still quite a bit there. Let's get a very wet bit. Let's rub some water into it. Really soak that. Whew, hot, very hot. And I'm just going to give it one final, very aggressive steam, trying to keep the toe cap out of this. Yeah, so I'll allow this to cool and dry, reassess it when it's totally dry. In many cases, you do need to give a second treatment too. It does shrink further as it dries over the next few hours. It seems pretty good as we are. There we go. It seems pretty good, but not 100%. But that 100% very well might appear as the shoe dries. We'll see. So it's 50-50. Either will or it won't need a second application. As well as it's extremely hot. Oh, excuse me, sweating. Very hot here. Yeah. Whilst the skin's very hot and wet, they don't shrink back perfectly. It's the cooling and the drying as much as anything that makes it shrink. So there we go. Let's have a look. Wow, yeah, I'm pleased with that. Just press it into shape a little bit. It's incredibly hot actually. I just want to force it with my hands. It's hot. Very, very hot. So I'm squeezing my fingers into the welt, and squeezing my fingers onto the vamp. Squash it completely flat whilst it's very, very hot. Actually, it's cooling a bit now. It's not too hot to handle now. And, so as I say to you, it's the cooling process as much as anything that forces the shape. So if you force a bit of cooling with your hands, whilst literally manoeuvring the skin to where you want it, that really does help. Gosh, that's made a big difference. Nearly, they're going quite cool now. So yeah, you definitely need the vinyl glove for this, because that was really hot. Okay, it's not so hot now. Slow process. Here we go. So really press it down there as it cools into my fingers. It goes cool very quickly under your fingers. I can almost feel it hardening off and shrinking under my fingers. There we go. I think that's about it. Right, we're going to stop there. So that's lost quite a few millimeters, a good between 5 and 8 millimeters around here, and probably the same under there. It's got a much tighter curve. That'll be obvious when I bring the other shoe out, when I'll compare the two together when the process is finished. The other shoe that's not been treated, so we'll find that this one will be thinner, it'll be slim around here, you know, much more contoured waist, and it'll be flatter. We'll need to do quite a lot of work on the skins. This does play havoc with the skin. It leaves a gritty surface. Any cracks that were in the skin, instead of the cracks butting together, the cracks sort of peak up. You can smooth that off with abrasives. When the cracks are butted together, it's very difficult to smooth them out. They swallow. But what they've now done is ejected, so we'll be able to take those peaks off. I can feel the peaks now, and there's a few. You know, it's quite smooth generally. So we'll give the whole shoe a good smoothing with abrasives before we put on the moisturiser. I'll also do the edging. I don't like, personally, it's a personal taste, I don't like the shiny, glitzy sort of sole edging that gives almost like a nail varnish appearance around there and onto the heel. Personally, I don't like that. I always use abrasives to smooth these areas, and I just use you know, shoe cream, like a dark brown, you know, shoe cream to soak into the edge of the skin. And personally, I like the finish of the heel and the sole edging like that. It's just a personal thing, and but I'll show you how to do that as well. We're going to stop here. I really do hope that you found something interesting and enjoyable and, you know, informative about this process. If you've enjoyed the video and found it useful, please give us the thumbs up, and perhaps subscribe to the channel. We've got quite a few more videos coming over the next couple of days of the finishing of this shoe. We need to leave this at least 12, maybe 24 hours before we can assess whether it does or doesn't need any further shrinking. And I guess actually, from experience, I don't think it does. Don't think it does. No, I don't think it's going to need any more. But sometimes when it's dry, you think, oh, it's a bit disappointing, it hasn't gone as far as you thought. But I'm hoping that we've got this one in one go. But as I say, it's not the first time this one's been shrunk. The first time I did it, I think I had to do it 3 times. We had to remove a lot more than I'm doing today. That was the original manufacturer's shape that I was trying to shrink away. All I'm trying to shrink away today is the excess stretch that's been caused by me wearing them. So yeah, we'll stop there, and thank you for watching, and please give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed this video. We'll see you at the next video. Thank you for watching, appreciate it.